Hello everybody, it's Sexual Health Week. So in the UK, it is currently Sexual Health Week. It is run by a charity called Brook. They took it over from the Family Planning Association, which unfortunately went bust at the end of last year. Very sad times indeed. But every single year in September, we have a Sexual Health Week, which is themed and depending on what is the hot topic in that particular year. And this year is to do with mandatory RSE. So RSE stands for Relationships and Sex Education. And RSE was made mandatory in English schools this September. However, there are one or two things that have been happening recently which have delayed it somewhat. By the way, my name is Andy. I usually do sex education content on this channel. Videos more or less every single week. There's a good reason to stick around. You should do that. You'll learn stuff. So some schools said that they weren't ready to start teaching mandatory RSE from this September because of the coronavirus pandemic. And the government said, okay, we understand, let's give you 2 more months where you have to do all the stuff that they have to do before they can start teaching RSE, such as consulting the parents of the school and all sorts of other things like that. And that means that the actual mandatory date is going to be from the summer term, basically after Easter, in 2021. However, you notice I said English schools. Now, I made a video about this about 12 months ago about the new guidelines which came out. Well, in that video, I said England and Wales a lot. I was wrong to do so. In Wales, sex education will not be mandatory in schools until 2022, which is when the new mandatory curriculum comes out. And in Scotland, it's currently planned for September 2021. And in Northern Ireland, there's nothing planned at all. So, sorry, Northern Ireland. As usual, you're unfortunately left out and will not have the benefit of mandatory sex education in your schools. Or just relationships education, for crying out loud. If you don't want to do the mandatory sex part, for crying out loud, do the mandatory relationships part. That would make such a difference. Anyway, rant over about that. So in England, though, it's technically mandatory from now, from this month, from this September. And the schools which have actually planned ahead and have consulted parents and have a curriculum and are going to start teaching it from this term, well done to you. For the schools in England that haven't done that, why didn't you? The coronavirus pandemic only started in like March. That's when it started affecting schools, right? Here in the UK. Why hadn't you sorted it out by then? You only had a term and a bit before, you had to start teaching it. Why weren't you? Anyway, I said that was the end of the rant. It wasn't true, was it? I think some schools have been dragging their feet on this. And it's rather shown, considering now that some, and actually most schools are ready to start teaching it, but some aren't. Anyway, as I said, it is Brook's Sexual Health Week, and the topic of mandatory RSE is something they want to cover because of the schools obviously currently having to get together and teach it. And they have 10 top tips for delivering RSE in schools, and I thought, why not basically steal their thing? Share best practice. That's what we said when I was a student union officer, when we want to steal somebody else's thing from their student union. So I thought, why not share best practice and go through their points, and I can talk about them. And any teachers that might be watching this, you are welcome to take them. Visit Brook's website as well. But these are the points. So number 1, you should research the topic. I mean, this is pretty standard, isn't it? If you want to teach something, you should research it beforehand. Most teachers know this. They do lesson plans and things like that. RSE is just the same, right? You've got a topic, research it, do a lesson plan. But also, make sure you find out the most current information. Laws change. Laws may not be what you thought they were. So make sure that you're up to date on the current information. Number 2, use a mixture of resources. So, of course, use videos, quizzes. Sure, you can talk at them, but make sure you have activities and things which they learn without just having to listen to people. Brook has resources. There are plenty of resources out there to help you. But make sure that it's not just the traditional talk to a big class. Now, RSE isn't just RSE. There are things which it kind of overlaps with. So it's not just biology, right? It's not just science. It's also things like language. So it overlaps with English, right? Are certain terms slang? Are they outdated? Are they offensive? Why is that the case? That's the kind of thing you could focus on, right? Where does it move over into other things? Maths is a good one as well, because things like how effective condoms are, it's a percentage, right? So condoms are 98% effective when used perfectly in a typical year. So maybe you could use it as a kind of maths lesson as well and get over the same kind of points. Number 4 is that it's okay not to know everything. You know, you're not going to know everything. You can, if you're doing a series of classes, you can take away questions, research them, come back at the next class. Perfectly fine. You can check resources that you've got with you, that kind of thing. That is far better than just making something up or saying something that you think you know, that you haven't actually checked, but you think is the case. Not always the best idea. But number 5, don't feel like you have to answer every single question. Sometimes it's best if people don't know, right? Or the whole group doesn't need to know. So perhaps they ask a question where some people in the group just aren't ready to hear that answer, and you know your pupils best, right? You know the group of people that you're teaching best. If it's appropriate to do so, you can have a conversation maybe separately with that particular person. It might be that they want a question answered about themselves specifically, and it might be better to see if you can speak to that person on their own. Number 6 is to use correct terminology. As a sex educator myself, this is why I say vulva rather than vagina. Vagina is a part of the vulva. It is a particular part of the vulva, but the vulva includes, whenever you talk about the vulva, you've got to go through it. The labia majora, the labia minora, the urethra, the vagina, of course, itself, the clitoris. It doesn't quite include the anus, but it's there and it's separate, right? That is the vulva. But also, don't use slang terms, right? And try and kind of encourage the students not to use the slang terms. So if you hear cock, say you mean penis. Because apart from anything else, there are some slang terms which mean multiple things. Probably won't hear this in class, but jigger, right? Jigger has 36 meanings, including both vagina, vulva, and penis. So who knows what they could be talking about? It's just a kind of generic euphemism, isn't it? And also using the right words means they become less of a taboo thing. And this is kind of half the point of RSC, yeah? To make talking about sex not as taboo as it currently is. Number 7 is to be aware of your own personal views on things. So, I don't know, you might be against sex before marriage, right? For example. But you're teaching an RSE class, that isn't something you should be impressing on people. It's certainly something you can say which people believe in. That's fine, that's perfectly reasonable. But it's not something that you should be impressing on young people if you're trying to teach them about sex and relationships. You know, the whole point in these classes is that you're teaching them about what the kind of things that happen, whether that's in wedlock or otherwise. That's perhaps a very specific example, an extreme example, but there are individual things which individuals have as beliefs that you can try and push onto young people if you're not careful about how you're teaching it. Perhaps one of them is that you think anal sex is disgusting. Well, what if the kids have already had it? You know, don't try and judge people in the classroom. I mean, you're teachers, you should know about this, but it's worth mentioning it again. Try to be inclusive with your language. Number 8, this is. Try to be inclusive with your language. And the easiest way of doing that is not saying she, him, her at all, right? Use they and them. I've said elsewhere on this channel that, you know, trans people have body parts which don't relate to their pronouns, right? Just because someone's got a vulva doesn't make them a she. Just because somebody is a he doesn't mean they've got a penis. So say they and them. Real easy. But also don't make everything about a woman and a man. Heterosexual couples. There are loads of different relationships out there, not just monogamous relationships as well, polyamorous relationships, all the rest of it. We're not saying that you have to go through everything. What we're saying is that what my opinion is on this, is that, you know, You don't have to specifically talk about monogamous or heterosexual couples. Kind of ignore the genders completely might be better. Depends on the group of people. It depends how you feel and what you're comfortable with saying. Tip number 9 is to reflect on everything. Just reflect on your learning. Reflect on the teaching, the class, everything. Speak with colleagues about the class, what went well, what you change. Maybe even at the end of it, speak to the pupils and see what they liked and what they didn't like, what they thought went well or thought went badly. And number 10 is to have fun. Talking about sex should be fun, right? It shouldn't be boring. As professionals, as anybody really should know, learning is best done when people aren't bored to death with it. Giggles are to be expected, and people being slightly uncomfortable with maybe the topics that they're teaching and the topics they're learning about. There are, of course, topics which are much more serious than other ones. When you're talking about consent, for example, that is a serious topic. It's to do with the law. It's to do with respecting other people. That's a serious thing, and you can use a serious tone for that. But there are definitely plenty of aspects of RSE where you can be jovial, happy, and have a laugh. And Brook's bonus tip here is to collaborate. You don't have to do this on your own. Every single school up and down the country is going to be having to do this either this year or in future years. And there's going to be a lot more resources maybe out there for you over the next year or so. So collaborate with other schools, collaborate with other teachers around the country and see what you like and see what works and see what doesn't work. So that is Brook's 10 tips, or 11 if you love the bonus one as well. Tips for teaching RSE. And even if you're not a teacher, even if you're just somebody who might want to go into sex education in the future, these tips are going to be really useful for you. I've got to train the trainer qualifications, so okay, I'm not a teacher, but a lot of these things I've used in training, in preparing training plans for groups of people, usually 18 to 21-year-olds, where sex education is something which is still needed. I will link to Brook's tips in the description just down below. If you've got any tips of your own, you can leave them in the comments. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. You can do that just down below as well. Subscribe because I make videos every single week. And remember to click the little bell so you're notified of when I next upload. And I will therefore see you next time. Bye-bye.